All right. I would like to call this meeting to order. We're going to do roll call and establish a quorum. Myself, Dolores Trujillo, present. Ken?
Ken Marlborough, present, Vice President, and a public member appointed by the Senate Rules Committee.
Susan?
Susan Naranjo, public member appointed by the Speaker.
Mary?
Mary Fagan, Nurses Services Administration Representative appointed by the Governor.
Betty?
Elizabeth Woods, appointed by the Governor in the advanced practice role.
Imelda?
Good morning, everybody. This is Imelda Ceja-Butkowitz, appointed by the Governor as a public member. Welcome, welcome.
And I neglected to state that my name is Dolores Trujillo. I am president of the BRN, elected president of the BRN, and I've been appointed by the Governor in the direct care nursing role. Loretta?
Thank you. I am Loretta Melby, also known as Lori, and I am the Executive Officer for the Board of Registered Nursing appointed by the board.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Can we move on to the next agenda item, item 2.0, moderator? Take it away.
Good morning. This is the Brn Moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then move on to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for the members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator or members of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be answered. When asking a question, please make sure the question is directed at the host, me, in the dropdown. If any attendees utilize a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subject to profane language. While you are free to express criticism or negative views, for the sake of the members of the public participating on the call, please do not use profane language when making public comments to the board. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or senior staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting, as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief, friendly reminder.
Thank you. I neglected to, Reza? I neglected to ask for Reza's introduction. Reza?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Reza Pejouhesh. I am the board's legal counsel. Thanks, Dolores.
Thank you, Reza. Moving on to item 3.0, public comment for items not on the agenda, items for future agenda. So public comments will be limited to 2 minutes or less per comment. So can we open it up for public comment, moderator?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." LS has a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, LS.
My name is LaShonda Shannon, and I want to take this time to recognize Thelma Harris as she recently resigned from her position as the board's chief of legislation. Anyone who had the privilege of working with her, whether directly or indirectly, can attest to her abilities, her commitment, and her willingness to go above and beyond for this board. But Thelma brought much more than a wealth of experience. She was ethical, always standing firm in her decisions to do the right thing, irrespective of who was telling her to do otherwise. She was compassionate and caring. Her open door policy meant that you could go in her office and cry when the work environment at this board was overwhelming. She was a listening ear to people of color, specifically Black and Latino employees who needed to be heard, hugged, and comforted when they were subjected to blatant racism and microaggressions. Thelma was a mentor. She took so many under her wing and genuinely wanted others to succeed. She never dimmed anyone else's light to make herself shine. Personally, she saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And most importantly, Thelma treated everyone with dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or classification. So Thelma Harris, on behalf of the employees here, we say thank you for all that you did while working at the BRN. This board didn't deserve you, but God knew we needed you. May God continue to bless you in all that you do in your future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, we can close the window. So I just received a text from Jovita that she's having a little bit of a problem. Her camera is disabled. Is there somebody that
Hold
can
on.
reach out?
Hold on, let me see. Jovita, are you here?
I am, but usually I can take off my camera, but this says that somebody's not allowing me to put on my camera.
Can try it again.
There I am. Oh,
Yep, there you are. Welcome.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
good morning. Thank you.
Okay, so we're on, Jovita, we're on item 4.0. This is the review and vote on whether to approve previous meeting minutes. I would like to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes for February 9th, February 17th, 2021, March 16th, 2021, and April 8th, 2021. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Elizabeth Woods.
Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I do have just a couple of very minor amendments in the minutes from February 9th and February then it has my title as a patient care representative as opposed to nursing services administration member. And then on page 14 of the minutes from February 9th, it has my name listed as Karen Fig, and if that could just be changed to Mary.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
So I would like to restate my motion. I would like a motion to accept the meeting minutes with corrections. If there's any other, sorry, are there any other comments from the board or corrections? No?
I'll second that as stated.
Okay. Can we open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. All right, so we're going to take the vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Ken?
Ken Marlborough votes yes.
Susan?
Susan Naranjo votes yes.
Jovita?
Votes yes.
Mary?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Betty?
Elizabeth Woods, yes.
And Imelda.
Imelda votes yes.
Thank you.
Madam President, just for clarification, I think Jovita needs to abstain from both the February meetings. She wasn't on the board at that time.
Thank you for helping me with that. I totally forgot. I meant to say only from, I think I was there on March 16th and April 8th. And,
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you not for February.
No problem.
So, thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
So the vote carries. We can move on to the next agenda item. Item 5.0, BRN future priorities and proposals for discussion and possible action. 5.1, discussion and possible action on regulatory proposal to modify California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 1410, Application 1450, Definitions, and 1456, Continuing Education Courses. Lori, will you be speaking on this?
My understanding is that Danielle Rogers would be speaking on this. Is she in the attendees list?
I don't believe we have Danielle. We have Heather Hoganson. who
We have Heather.
is,
Sorry, thank you.
also an attorney in our regulations unit. Heather is in attendance, and if she could be promoted to panelist or unmuted or, open her up to speak, that would be great.
Mark, are you
Heather?
able to find her?
Yes, I found her. Heather, would you like to be unmuted or would you like to be on camera? Oh, sorry, I guess I should unmute her. Okay, good morning, Heather. Heather?
She's unmuted.
Yeah, she keeps muting herself. There she goes.
Sorry, my mouse was getting a little ahead of me. Camera is fine.
Okay, 1 second. And if you go down to the bottom and start your video. Perfect. Good morning.
Good morning. So on 5.1, we've got a few different things going on with regulations. The application is in order to put all of the required elements into the CCR, and that is required by the Administrative Procedure Act. And so a lot of those elements that have been asked for are being put into regulation. On 1450, we've moved some of the language that the board has previously approved into the definition section, as well as add implicit bias, as is shown in the proposed text. And then on 1456, continuing education courses, we've made a couple of modifications. The board had approved the experimental medical procedures previously. We've suggested removing the term "or under study" because even things that are approved are continuously put under new studies. So we thought that might be unclear. And then we've added the stuff about the implicit bias as required by AB 241. Are there any questions on what the regs do or questions about regs in general?
Can you just give us a little background on the implicit bias, Greg, please?
Sure. So recently, AB 241 required the Board of Registered Nursing as well as physician's assistants and doctors to include something about implicit bias in continuing education. And we have taken some of these information directly from the statute and referred directly to the statute to make sure we are in conformity. But basically, implicit bias means the attitudes or internalized stereotypes, that affect our perceptions, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. And implicit bias often contributes to unequal treatment of people based on race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, disability, and other characteristics. And that language is taken from the legislative documents themselves. And then because the statute requires that it affect things about direct patient care, we've added in a definition for direct patient care to include preventative care and first-line supervision.
Thank you. I seem to have lost my camera. I'm going to have to.
No, we see you.
Yeah, I don't see anyone else. It just dropped off. I have event in progress, but it doesn't show me anything. I'm sorry.
Dolores, did you accidentally minimize the screen?
Let me look. No, it's not there. There it is. Okay. I went out and came back in. I'm sorry. Okay, so on the implicit bias, there is a line that states first line supervision on paragraph 6I, I believe, on the 1450 definitions.
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
So I would like to recommend that we strike out first line supervision.
You have something else that you'd like to put instead?
I was thinking about that, but I lost everything I had up. So maybe what we can do is go back and do the rest of the meeting. And sorry, losing the camera, I lost everything. Okay.
Dolores, this is Lori. On 1450, it looks like the statement that you're referring to about first line supervision is in the definition section. And it looks like we could simply just remove the "and first line supervision" part of that sentence. And I don't know that it would need to be replaced with anything if we just didn't want to add the "and." Is that what you're
let's take it out.
looking for?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I have it up now. So I wanted to take the "and" out.
Okay.
And just
so then the definition for direct patient care would be the provision of healthcare services directly to individuals being treated for or suspected of having physical or mental illness. Direct patient care includes preventative care. Full stop.
Yes.
Okay.
This is Betty. I have a question about direct patient care. I don't have the whole thing in front of me right now, but that, I'm assuming that that does include telephone care?
I don't see why it wouldn't. It would be being directly to individuals.
Are you talking about like advice nursing? Betty?
Yes, or any type of care that's not direct face-to-face contact, personal contact. So much of the care now is not, you're not in the same room with the person.
Correct, Betty. This is Lori. On the definitions for direct patient care, it just states that direct patient care means the provision of healthcare services directly to individuals being treated for or suspected of having physical or mental illnesses. Direct patient care includes preventive care. So there is nothing that delineates that it has to be a specific modality to receive that care. That definition is left open for that. Additionally, when working with our regulatory analyst, Raz Siddiqui, on this, this direct patient care definition has been used in other California agencies, specifically with CDPH. So we are in alignment with the definition and not creating a new definition for the Board of Registered Nursing.
So
So
you're satisfied with that definition, that it can include being physically present or not physically present with the patient?
I myself am, yes, Betty. As we know, direct patient care is just providing care. It does not have to be in person. And the wave of the future is more telehealth and telemedicine. So I think that this encompasses that and does not need to be directly called out.
Okay.
Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Betty. And then additionally, just to add some further clarification on the update for the implicit bias. I know this is one of the first times that we are talking about the implementation of that bill that passed. We are set to go forward in January 2022 with requiring the continuing education providers to include implicit bias in each one of their continuing education courses. We have started communication. We sent out reminders to every single CEP provider that we do have in our Breeze data bank, and are continuing to field questions regarding that. And then in January 2023, the bill also asked us to start an auditing process to ensure that the courses that were delivered that previous year and going forward include implicit bias. And so the purpose, and Heather can speak to this more, which because it was her suggestion, and I'm grateful for that, was we already had a continuing education package, regulatory package change in process. And that was the one that she was talking about around the experimental procedures and the updates in that language. And it was going to be more, it was going to be a faster process if we added the implicit bias changes into this regulatory package that's already in process so that we can have this completed in a timely fashion. And so thank you very much, Heather, for being on top of that and giving us that suggestion. And we look forward to getting this moving through the process quickly.
I have a question if I can ask.
Sure. Go ahead, Ken.
Ken Marlborough. Yeah, this is way above my understanding, but I'm just curious as to on the first line supervision, why was it put in? 2 questions. Why was it put in? And just explain why it should be put out so I can better understand it.
It was put in as a direct copy of previous language used in other state departments. And Dolores is the one asking for it to be removed. She can provide some more clarification on that.
Oh, okay, thanks.
So, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody wanted to speak. So the direct line supervision is something that really is not in the language for the BRN, and it implies that it's more of a management direct line supervision, whereas we're looking at the Nurse Practice Act, and it encompasses all nurses. And that language, the direct line supervision, is not found in the Nurse Practice Act.
Okay, all right. Thanks for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Heather.
This is, excuse me, real quick. So I assume all the board members kind of understand that requested change and agree to it, to strike that phrase, or does anyone happen to have any lingering concerns about that?
I'm still not sure I understand it. I'm reading it again. And just to clarify, Dolores, it's the section on page 51.
Yeah, paragraph 6I, I believe.
Dolores,
And
I feel the same way. Could you give us an example about how in practical things would change potentially in terms of an application to someone if this language was changed from how it is now to how it's being proposed?
I think, I'm just trying to think of an example. Lori, can you give me a hand here?
I sure can. I could actually speak to our faculty approval process that we use at the Board of Registered Nursing. And one of the statements in approving it says that the faculty member must be recent at the level of a bedside nurse. And so we're looking at direct patient care. That is the level of the bedside nurse. And when we evaluate that, we specifically look to see that they are doing hands-on care and that they are providing that. And when we find out, if we get an application from a faculty member that is a supervisor or a unit manager or a unit director, we do not automatically approve because we realize that they are more in a supervision role. And a lot of times roles that include supervision pull them away from the bedside and pull them away from that direct patient care. And so if we were to consider them for approval at the level of the bedside nurse or in that direct patient role capacity, we actually require them to submit a resume to us outlining that they jump into patient care when census is high, or that they cover shifts if something happens. So the direct patient care, the bedside nurse, even when we work within the nursing education consultant role here at the BRN, we do not include the supervisory roles automatically without clarification to ensure that the recency that they are demonstrating is that at the direct patient care level. And so that to me would be a good example of what we do currently right now within the BRN. And then again, when you're looking at the practical use from day to day, I'm sure that you can hear from many nurses that would argue those on the front line, those that are triaging patients and going into the patient's room and participating on the telehealth calls and putting hands on the patient, auscultating and palpating and using all of your senses to help do your nursing diagnoses and stuff with smelling the ampicillin in the patient's urine and smelling the meth that's coming out through their sweat and their pores and smelling the neglect on the child, that is not done from a supervisory role, that is done from a direct patient care hands-on role. And so I do understand Dolores's request, and I hope that those examples helped you guys to understand as well.
Hi,
Thank you,
this is
Lori.
emailed. This is emailed. I have a question. So basically what you're saying is they have to have recent direct patient care to be considered. It's my understanding, once a nurse, always a nurse. Nurses don't tend to forget their bedside manners. So I'm not sure where this is going.
So to provide additional clarification, that's not what that is being said, Imelda. So I'm sorry if I made that seem like that was. The example that I used was a process that we were already doing in nursing education consulting role for approving faculty. We do require that our faculty be recent within the last 5 years, as we want our students who are under their direction to be taught the cutting edge medical and nursing technology, et cetera. And so we do have a recency requirement. That was an example used to try to explain the direct patient care and the supervision difference. In this definitions for 1450, this is a definition section that is specifically under continuing education that you will find that is addressed in our regulations. Within regulations for continuing education, 1450 is the first regulation contained in that section. There was not a definition for implicit bias, and there was not a definition for direct patient care in the definitions under the continuing education section. When you read the bill that was put forth on implicit bias, the direction in the implicit bias bill said that the implicit bias continuing education courses needed to be included in all courses related to direct patient care. Therefore, to provide that clarifications, because that's what we were getting a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails where the continuing education providers said, how are you defining direct patient care? So we looked in our Nurse Practice Act, there is no definition of direct patient care. And so then within this current regulation, we did go back and add the definition of direct patient care to provide clarity for the continuing education providers. This does not speak to recency. This does not speak to once a nurse, always a nurse. What this speaks to in this section specifically with 1450 is defining direct patient care so that the continuing education providers know that in what courses they will be required to provide implicit bias. An example of a direct patient care that would require implicit bias training is state that the course they wanted to provide was on trach care or patient oxygenation, some sort of that thing. And then what we would need them to do is talk about the implicit bias and how that affects the care of that patient. There are a lot of nurses that would be stating, you know, I don't have any implicit bias, I don't have any issue. And although that might be true for that particular nurse, that is not true for every nurse. And in fact, the implicit bias goes deeper than that. There are articles out there right now that talk about the pulse oximeter, and that is the little clip that goes on a patient's finger that measures the oxygen saturation within the blood. It also gives you a heart rate, and you can correlate that with any other monitor that you put on them. When that pulse oximeter was developed, it was developed and tested on primarily white people. Therefore, that pulse oximeter from the company that built the pulse oximeter has implicit bias built into it, as it will miss hypoxemia in people with darker skin tones. Therefore, it's not about just specifically teaching the nurse, it is about understanding that implicit bias is built into even the equipment that we use to provide the care for our patients. And that is something that we have to be aware of. So this definition in 1450 delineates specifically what patient care is. It is a very broad explanation that covers all care provided with people with physical or mental illness or suspected physical or mental illness that they are receiving treatment for or could receive treatment for. It has nothing to do with recency. It has nothing to do with supervision. We want to make sure that we affect the direct line, hands-on person and teach them about the things so that errors can be decreased and that people with darker skin tones or anything are not continuing to be harmed within at least California. So hopefully that helped to clarify a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. You know, not being a nurse, which is always pointed out, I'm not a nurse and I don't understand exactly everything. I'm just looking out for patient safety and some of the other regulations. So with this direct implicit biases, is that going to prevent us from, you know, we have a difficult time already getting educators. Is it going to?
This should not.
Should not.
Yeah, this should not prevent it. This is a regulatory update that's already been passed by the legislator. We do have to follow that. This is already been voted on and passed, and we are now just to implement this. What this does is this does not affect the continuing education provider application process. This affects the courses that they deliver. And so we will continue to have our continuing education providers. They will continue to apply for that status in the same manner that they always have. What will be an additional check is that the courses that they submit for approval, that in the course objectives or the course outline, that it has some kind of a statement in there talking about how if this is a if this is a topic that is pertinent to direct patient care, that it will include information on implicit bias. And then when we start the audit process up in January of 2023, the part of that audit process where we will be auditing continuing education courses that are provided by these providers who are already approved, that they include this. And then with the understanding that the Board of Registered Nursing, the intention is never for the Board of Registered Nursing to be punitive if they find anything that is of error. So if we do these, when we do these audits, if we find that somebody is not in compliance, then what we will do as a team of board staff is work with that person to bring them into compliance. So if we find that a course that we believe affects direct patient care does not include implicit bias, then we will be reaching out to that continuing education provider and in making sure that one, they are aware of it, and two, help them on developing a plan to get that implicit bias put back in or added to or included in to the courses with direct patient care so that those can continue to be offered to our nurses so that they can get their continuing education units.
So Lori, I have a question, and maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but help me understand why we wouldn't want to include implicit bias training in courses beyond direct patient care, say leadership courses, where, you know, there's huge potential for implicit bias, whether it's around performance evaluations or hiring or charge nurse roles or what have you. Is that what we're saying? Is this would only apply to direct patient care and not leadership courses or other types of administrative courses where we grant continuing education credit?
So to provide clarification with that, thank you, Mary. That's actually a great question. This is not to say that that could not be added. The language that comes in regulation is in direct response to statutory language. So statute is the law that California passes, and the regulation are essentially the policies and procedures that the BRN does to meet that statutory requirement. Anything that is not in regulation, if we require it, becomes underground regulation, and that is problematic. Again, the focus for regulation is to answer or clarify statute. In statute, it is specifically written that this implicit bias information has to be in all courses for direct patient care. Therefore, our regulation has to match that statute. Now, if there are companies that truly want to add implicit bias into those supervisory courses that they're answering as well, that's something that can be done and is absolutely encouraged to be done by us. Adding regulatory requirements in that are not supported in statute, that ends up being a very kind of gray area, and we cannot move forward with that. So our regulation is written to answer statute. Our regulation does not create new law. Therefore, we cannot add the supervisory section into our regulation at this point. If there's a cleanup bill that somebody wants to pass that would get put forth through legislation that would then require it to be included into the supervisory continuing education course units, then we would then follow suit at that point and do a regulatory update and answer that. But regulations are policy to answer statute, not create new law.
This is Reza. I can just real quickly add to that. Business Professions Code 2736.5B says that a continuing education course dedicated solely to research or other issues that does not include a direct patient care component is not required to contain curriculum that includes implicit bias in the practice of nursing. So you could say that like management CE classes and things like that are also kind of fit into this other issues category that are kind of excluded from this implicit bias requirement under the statute. So hopefully that helps. I did have a question. Hopefully I can use this opportunity to throw it in there. And this is maybe for Lori and Heather, and I'm unfortunately just now kind of noticing this. So I'm sorry for not bringing it up sooner, but looking at the proposed text for section 1450, that's page 51 of the meeting materials of that PDF, and it's again agenda item 5.1. So looking at the text of 1450, subdivision A starts with "for purposes of this article," and then lists a definition for continuing education, course, and content. And then it looks like those subdivisions A1, 2, and 3 would become subdivisions A, B, and C.
Right, and the first A would be deleted. That should have been deleted, sorry.
Well, the question I had is, you know, just as it stands right now, the section starts with "for purposes of this article." Is that text going to be retained so that the language "for purposes of this article" applies to subdivisions A through I? Is that how this would ultimately look?
For purposes of this article would be the 1450 through, I think, 1457. So it would incorporate all of the sections dealing with CE.
But are we saying that these definitions in section 1450 are limited to "for purposes of this article"? That's kind of how I would expect it to read.
Yes, that's existing regulatory text for the purposes of this article. We're just deleting the A and renumbering it to make it clearer. But that this article is all the CE stuff.
So it would start with section 1450, "for purposes of this article, colon A, continuing education means," and then B, C, D, E, etc., right?
And then Reza, just for further clarification, article that they're talking about is Article 5. So under 16 CCR, it is Article 5, continuing education, and that encompasses, Heather, for your clarification, that's regulation 1450 through 1459.1.
Okay, I'm good. I was just confirming that language "for purposes of this article" will be applied to subdivisions H and I, which are new under this proposed regulatory text. So
Right. So yes. So in 1456, the section about you have to include implicit bias, that is covered by the 1450 definition.
okay. Unless anyone else had any, issues or questions with this regulatory text, I know that we had one request by Dolores for a revision. If there are any other requests, or if board members still want to kind of discuss that piece about first line supervision, we can. But if that's kind of the end of the questions or concerns or comments about this piece, I think it may be worthwhile to just take a quick motion and confirm that piece that Dolores requested about the revision to this regulatory text, and then maybe a quick check to see if there's any public input on that, and then go from there.
Sure. Okay.
I don't want to, if there's any other issues folks saw or questions they had, that, not to move past that.
And then just to be clear that this just begins the regulatory process, that as this moves through the regulatory process, there will be more times that public comment will be received, potential edits will occur, they'll go back out to public comment, and so it'll go through that entire regulatory process.
Thank you, Lori. That's good to know.
This is Betty. I'd just like to put in one issue that that's been bugging me for a while, and it's the terminology that we use for things. And I think we should stop using the terminology bedside nurse and hands-on nurse, because it really doesn't take in all of the issues that nurses deal with, and particularly now that we're doing a lot of things online. We've been so used to using those terminology, and we've used it in this discussion this morning several times. I would like to see us trying to get away from that terminology, which really doesn't encompass all the things that nurses do, how they do them, and where they do them.
That's very valid, Betty. Thank you.
And just to note that the regulation itself does not use those terms. It's adding that definition of direct patient care, which may in fact help that issue.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Yes, and then we did not include that language in that definition for direct patient care. That was language used to try to clarify as much as possible in this discussion, because those are terms that have been used in the past, and we were trying to bring that what past definitions and terms were and equal them to what our current terms are that no longer include that language. So we did hear you, Betty, and that is the direction that we're moving into. So in specifically looking at the definition for this, we chose not to include hands-on or bedside, but I wanted to make sure that people knew that that's what we were referring to in this by doing that language change.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other comments, questions? Okay, so Reza, you mentioned that a motion could be made to accept this change and open up for public comment.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay. All right. So I would like to make the motion to accept the change to strike out direct patient care. No, not direct patient care. First line supervision. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
That motion.
Thank you. That was Jovita or Betty? Sorry,
That was Jovita, sorry.
Thank you, Jovita. So can we open it up for public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, so we will call for the vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Ken Marlborough,
Ken Marlborough votes yes.
Susan,
Susan Naranjo votes yes.
Ovita,
Jovita Dominguez votes yes.
Mary,
Mary Fagan, yes.
Betty,
Betty Woods, yes.
and Imelda.
Imelda's going to abstain.
Okay. We have a vote majority. Thank you. Can we move on to the next agenda item of 5.2, Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee NPAC updates? 5.2.1 NPAC Charter.
This is Reza. Can I just ask real quick? Do we have any agenda items that we need Heather Hoganson to remain for, or are we, release her?
I don't think so, Lori.
We have no other agenda items for Heather. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather.
Okay, moving on to 5.2. Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee NPAC updates, and 5.2.1 NPAC Charter.
Thank you, Dolores. This is Lori, and I will take over that. Macaulay Fusarens is out of the office today. She is the board staff liaison for the NPAC and the NMAC committees. So I will go ahead and cover 5.2 and 5.3 for her during this board meeting. So 5.2.1 is the NPAC charter. We have had 2 NPAC meetings. The first one came in and they established a chair and a co-chair. They accepted the implementation plan and they voted and they received information only on this NPAC charter. They did have some discussion and they did request one item to be clarified. It was in the charter already, but they wanted the language to be a little bit more clear. So specifically, the language was around ensuring that the NPAC committee could be heard directly by the board and did not have to go through practice committee. Our policy at the board is for everything to kind of go to practice committee first and then go to the board. We are continuing that policy, but it is not a requirement. The reason that we're continuing the policy to have both the NMAC and NPAC committees report to practice committee is to allow for additional public comment and allow for additional board input. We know that the practice committee is manned by board members and that with practice committee, if this goes to practice committee, any of the items goes to practice committee, that has a separate day in a separate month where public can comment on any item that is there. And then it would move to the board and it would also get more public comment and public feedback. So to really allow for that to happen, we plan to consider to continue that same process. When the advisory committee members read the charter, they wanted to make sure that we put language in there that said, time permitting, because we do know that there is some really strict and fast deadlines coming up on the implementation of 890 as well as the implementation of 1237. And so there was an update added to it that does state, if time does not allow information and recommendations to be forwarded to nursing practice committee, referral may be made to the full board. We know that that is practice right now, that items can go to full board without it going to any kind of committee previous to go into full board. But that advisory committee wanted to make sure we added the language in. So we did. We added that language in. We did share that out as information only, and it is coming to you guys for approval And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer questions. Reza was with me on both of these NPAC committees, so him and I are here to answer questions in the absence of Macaulay Fusarians.
This is Betty. Who's the president and the vice president? You mentioned a president and a vice president.
We do. Samantha Gambles-Farr was voted in as the president of the NPAC committee. She is a nurse practitioner. And the co-chair is Dr. Edward Ray, and he is a medical doctor.
And who's going to be the contact person?
The liaison for that committee right now is Macaulay Fusarians. And she would have been presenting today, but she is off. And just for clarification on terms, it is chair and co-chair for the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee.
Are there any other questions from the board? Seeing that there's no further questions, can we move on to item 5.3, Nurse Midwifery Advisory Committee NMAC updates?
That would be up to Reza if we wanted to combine and make two separate motions. They are identical charters, except we've moved out nurse practitioner to nurse midwife and changed the specific statutory numbers in that. However, it is separate agenda items, and so typically that would require a motion, a second, public comment, and then taking a vote for each item. But that would be up to Reza if he wanted us to combine.
You know, actually, we'll do them separately if that's okay with you, Reza.
Okay.
Either way is fine with me. I'd be fine with combining them because they're so similar, and you know, we'll still give an opportunity for public comment as to both. Combining them is fine, but if you want to do them separate, no problem that way either.
Okay.
I think just we combine them just to move things along, right?
Yeah.
Dates, please.
Find them.
I want to hear the update
Okay.
from the
If you-
Midwifery Advisory Committee.
Okay, so if you guys are okay with combining them, I will go ahead and speak to 5.3.1, the NMAC charter. They had their very first meeting yesterday. They did establish a chair and vice chair. I'm going to ask my board staff to help me out on that. I do not remember who the vice chair was. The chair was Mary Kay, or Mary Catherine, as she's known. And hopefully I can look up really quick in my notes to find out who the vice chair was. Reza, you might have it. That was established yesterday. Jenna is the one. Sorry, thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. Jenna was voted in as vice chair. And so they do have the chair and the vice chair chosen. They also reviewed the implementation plan, approved it. They did want to add one section to the implementation plan that was presented back to the board in November and December last year. And that is to add a section for FAQs. So we will be adding the section on FAQs to the implementation plan. And they accepted the charter as written. They did not have any, additional questions or comments on the charter, knowing that it was updated from the NPAC when they met. And so it did include that language that we just talked about. And so they received it as information only as well. And it went forward with no additional comments or questions. So they will be scheduling their second meeting to go through any kind of regulatory changes or FAQs to provide clarification to the passing of 1237. And if you have, and the same person, Macaulay Fusarians, is serving as the staff liaison currently for that group as well. And so she is out, which is again why I'm reporting on this one here. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Any questions from the board before we open it to public comment and make a motion? Seeing that there's no further questions from the board, Reza, would I make a motion to accept the two reports from the NPAC and the NMAC committee?
Right, to approve both committee charters.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion that the board accept the charters from the NPAC committee and the NMAC committee, the Nurse Midwifery Committee, NMAC, and Nurse Practitioner Committee, NPAC. Do I have a second?
Second.
This is Betty. I will second it.
Thank you, Betty. Can we open it up for public comments?
We'll be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Mitchell Erickson would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Good morning, board members. I just wanted a clarification, probably from Loretta, around standard process. You mentioned that in this charter, there's an opportunity for time-limited issues to bypass the practice committee and go directly to full board. And I just wondered if you could define, or if it is defined, what time-limited issues reference and why that might happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. I'd be happy to answer that. There is no definition. I mean, to be honest with you, the anything can go to full board at any point. This was a specific request from the committee to have that language added in. And we wanted to follow what that committee asked for. So we did add that language in. As you know, by attending previous board meetings and even looking at other board processes, that any agenda item can be added to a board meeting within the 10-day posting period, and that there is zero requirement that it go to a committee first. This was language just added in there for their comfort and their ease. But all items can go directly to the board without any delay, without any hesitation, and does not have to go to committee first. Hopefully that answers your question, Mitch.
Yes, thank you, Loretta. Thanks so much.
Sharon Bogan would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much. I had the same question that Mitch had, and it's just if there. My other question is, was this going to be only items that they deem time sensitive, and will the committee? How will the committee come to a conclusion that it is? Are they going to have a vote? You know, it's got to be approved by all of them to not be discussed. And once we figure that out, is that going to be a written process so that the public can know how that's going to be handled? Thank you.
I could answer that too. Again, all of these are written processes. These will always be posted according to Bagley-Keene. There will be agendas that have every single item listed out on them that will be posted in advance for both Nurse Midwifery Advisory Committee, Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, the nurse practice committee as well as our board. That is a requirement within Bagley-Keene. So all agenda items will be written and will be publicly noticed for everybody to receive. When we do public noticing of our meetings, including materials, because all materials have to be put on our website as well. It gets posted to our website. That is a public website for everybody to come and look at. Additionally, it is emailed out through the listserv to everybody that subscribes to our website. And that is an email that goes out to their personal email or whatever email they've designated. So that's an additional way to communicate this out to them. Addition to that, we have a public relations officer that is part of our board staff. And that is updated then to our social media accounts as well, both Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And they get notices sent out that a board agenda has been posted or that board materials have been posted. And so that is shared out. Once they are out in those forums can be shared by any person that accesses, and that can be shared out. So it is, in fact, a ripple effect that we hope that this information goes out. It is written, it is publicly noted, and the materials are presented for public awareness as well. The committee members are on those emails. The committee members do receive those communications and additionally receive communication out from us saying that this has been posted. When we go through the meetings, if there is something that, say yesterday, so you can see we did have an NMAC meeting yesterday where they had information on the charter and it went straight to board today. There was no delay. And in fact, it was seen and in 1 day later. That is as fast as you can imagine it going. So our process is working and it is clear and it is there. We will be having a standing agenda item on our board meeting for NPAC and NMAC updates going forward. And we will not be causing any delays. So I'm hoping that by the example used right now in the discussion of the NMAC charter, that you guys will see that the NMAC charter was presented yesterday and it is in front of the board today, and that it did bypass nurse practice committee.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sharon.
Oh, I think that's all. I think I understand. So there is always going to be an opportunity for public comment then.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Yvonne would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Good morning, Yvonne Chung with the California Medical Association. Thank you to Ms. Melby for her explanation of the discussion around the NPAC charter. I'd just like to add a couple additional comments that I think that in addition to time-sensitive items being sent directly to the board, our concern is that we want to make sure that any recommendations that come out of the NPAC and go through the nursing practice committee, time sensitive or not, reach the board unfiltered, so that there is an assurance that the nursing practice committee would not be making any amendments to recommendations that come out of the nurse practitioner advisory committee prior to it getting to the board, and that would be clear. And I think that Ms. Melby had mentioned that the NPAC could designate items that are sent to the nursing practice committee as informational only, so that their only action would be a direct referral to the full board. And I just wanted to clarify that that was the case. Thank you very much.
That is the case. As you guys are aware, outlined in statute, it does state that the NMAC and the NPAC will report to the board. And so that will be unfiltered through the nurse practice committee. The nurse practice committee stop is one, to stay consistent with our practice, and two, to allow for additional public comment. So there will be no filter. And then just to be very clear, the only people that sit on the practice committee are board members. So board members will be hearing this 2 times. A subsection of them will. Other board members will be hearing them 1 time when it goes to board. So it will never be bypassed, and it will always go to a board member.
This is Reza. I'll just add, I'm not sure if I correctly understood a part of that comment, but it was about the NPAC submitting information only type items to the Nursing Practice Committee. Again, not sure if I understood that correctly, but just to be clear, the NPAC is an advisory committee. The Nursing Practice Committee is also an advisory committee. So the Nursing Practice Committee can only make recommendations to the board as well. It doesn't take action on its own initiative. So just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you, Reza.
Edward Ray would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, Ed Ray here. Actually, Reza, I just want to ask you really quickly. I am an NPAC member. Is it okay if I make a public comment? Reza, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, it took me a second to get off mute. It's kind of questionable. It's hard to say because it depends on who from the NPAC is on the line. So generally, kind of in an abundance of caution, and this is a rule that we apply to our board members as well. And in fact, it's even on our agendas, I think, that members of for example, one committee can attend another committee meeting, but are not allowed to participate. Likewise, board members can attend meetings of the committees that they are not on, but only as observers and not as participants. The issue, so you understand, I'm not trying to stifle comments, is that the Bagley-Keene Act, as you know, I'm sure prohibits serial communications. So if you make a comment here about something that's within the jurisdiction of the NPAC, other members of that committee may be on the line as well and hearing those comments, and that would then arguably be considered a meeting of the NPAC without abiding the formalities of having a meeting. So
Reza, there are other NPAC committee members in our attendees list. Specifically, just looking quick, is the other physician member. And so that's the second one down on our attendees list. So without looking further, I can already tell that there is another NPAC committee member in our attendees list.
okay.
Okay. I appreciate that. I don't want to violate Bagley-Keene rules, so I'll withdraw my question. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. If it's something that's just a question or something that can be addressed at the staff level, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Loretta. But I appreciate you understanding kind of the constraints for members of our committees. Of course, we want as much public participation and commentary as we can get, but those are our limitations.
Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you. So board members, we can take a vote on the motion. Myself, Dolores Trujillo, votes yes. Ken?
Ken Marlborough votes yes.
Susan?
Susan Naranjo votes yes.
Olita?
Rita Dominguez votes yes.
Mary?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Betty? Betty?
Woods, yes.
Thank you. And Imelda?
Imelda Seja Butwitz, yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. So the next agenda item is 5.4, discussion and possible action regarding the continuation and the role of the Advanced Practice Registered Nursing APRN Advisory Committee. And Lori, are you reporting out on this?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Dolores. So we have an advanced practice registered nurse advisory committee that was established in 2017. The purpose of that committee was to provide recommendations to the board on issues involving the advanced practice. Advanced practice nurses are nurse practitioners, certified registered nurse anesthetists, nurse midwives, and clinical nurse specialists. The two previous board agenda items, 5.2 and 5.3, covered two of those, and that was the nurse practitioner and the certified nurse midwife. The nurse practitioner has its own advisory committee, now required by statute, that was passed by AB 890 and is now in our BPC code 2837.102. And then the nurse midwife is an advisory committee established in statute as well. That was passed by SB 1237 and is now BPC code 2746.3. So out of the four advanced practice registered nurses that were represented within the APRN committee, two of them have their own separate advisory committees now. That leaves the certified registered nurse anesthetists, the CRNAs, and the clinical nurse specialists, the CNSs, without a committee of their own. And it now creates duplicative voices, for the nurse midwife and the nurse practitioner. So it is being asked of the board to consider equal representation of each specialty, considering that there's a variety of practice settings, practice types, practice issues specific to APRN groups, and that potentially discontinuing the current APRN structure and or the committee may better serve the CRNAs and the CNSs and allow a more focused representation by the respective advisory committees. So what the ask is to have the board consider sunsetting the APRN committee now that we have the nurse midwife committee established, the nurse practitioner committee established, and then asking to establish a certified a certified registered nurse anesthetist committee and a clinical nurse specialist committee. Therefore, all four APRN committees will have equal representation to the board. Thank you.
I'd like to open it up to the board for any comments or questions.
I just have a couple of questions just for clarification. So we would be separating, we would be adding two other committees. How will we choose the members and who will be on there? Will this require also a medical doctor on each one of these committees? And then lastly, with now having, I don't know how many committees we have total, but we're adding two more. Will that be an impact to the staff as well?
Thank you for those questions, Ken. By sunsetting one, we would only be adding one additional. And the plan is to have the committees report out on the same day and have them on the same schedule, as to not require additional time and preparation with an additional time or preparation date. And so the committee structure, that can be discussed and decided amongst the board on what input and stuff that you guys would like to have on it. As this would be a process very similar to what happened in 2017, where the idea is brought to the board, a charter is presented to the board, nominees and after an application period is brought to the board and voted in. So as you guys are familiar with the CNM committee and the nurse practitioner committee that was just established, that was done through the board. These processes would remain the same. We want everything to be as consistent as possible. With the addition of a medical doctor into the committee structure, again, that can be decided upon by the board. it is not in statute. It is not statutorily required. So what could happen is very similar to how the Nurse Midwife Committee previously ran prior to the passing of SB 1237. And that was a physician could be a member, but that the committee was not held up if we could not find a physician committee member. And so I think because it is not a statutory requirement, that would be something that the board could consider, is that a physician and a public member could become a member, but that would not hold up the work that is being done or needing to be done, why those positions are sought, because these two committees would not be statutorily required. However, that may be something statutorily required in the future. We do see that the movement was to get an NMAC committee and an NPAC committee. There are two other advanced practice nursing groups out there. And so that could be something that is sought later. So I would love to just kind of get ahead of the game on this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
This is Jovita Dominguez. I think that, well, I believe, I mean, they've strived hard to get to where they're at, that they do deserve to have, you know, their voices heard. And I can see how they would feel that they would not be heard if they, you know, if they don't have their own entity. So I agree that they need to have their own voice.
Lori, I may have missed it. Thank you, Jovita. I may have missed it, but part of Ken's question was the impact on BRN staff. Did I miss that part?
You did. I did answer that the plan was to have them on the same day as the NPAC and NMAC.
Okay.
And to not require a double posting and another day and, you know, additional staff. So we would staff one day and have one posting for all of the committees.
All right. Thank you, Lori. Are there any other questions, comments? So Reza, would we need to make a motion to establish these committees?
Yes, so a couple things. If you want to establish these separate committees, you should have a motion to do that. There's two things. One is deciding what's going to happen with your current APRN advisory committee. And then apart from that is whether you want to set up a CNS and CNA two committees for the, you know, those groups. I think it's you know, kind of necessary more or less to decide what's going to happen with the APRN advisory committee. Setting up the other two committees, as Lori, you know, Lori kind of made a case for why, and Jovita, you know, obviously saw some merit to having those separate committees. It's an option if you know, if you didn't feel the need for that, then you don't necessarily need to set up those other committees. But it is important, I think, to decide
Okay.
what's going to happen with this APRN advisory committee. So, yeah, I think there may be a number of motions depending on where the board wants to go.
Can it be combined into one motion as far as sunsetting the APRN committee in favor of establishing the CRNA and CNS committees, or they would have to be two separate motions?
I
You
think
said a number of motions, so.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, that's good. I think you could combine them, and it might even make sense to do that because maybe the establishment of the two other committees is kind of contingent on, you know, whether you want to sunset the APRN advisory committee. So I think it'd be fine to do one kind of global motion.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions and comments from the board? Okay, so I would like to make a motion that we sunset the APRN committee hold on. I started to write it out. I just want to make sure it makes sense. I would like to make a motion to sunset the APRN committee and create in its place two committees, one for the CRNA and one for the CNS practices. And that board staff commence work on both the CRNA and the CNS committees. Did that make sense? Should I restate that?
I think that covers it. One detail.
I just want to make sure I covered both. So
Yeah, I think delegating the staff to kind of, lay the foundation for that and do that work, gets that ball rolling. With the sunset of the APRN advisory committee, are you intending that basically take effect immediately if the motion is passed?
yes,
Thank you.
because I'm hoping that the other two committees would also start to lay the groundwork and take place very soon. Doesn't make sense to delay the sunset of the APRN.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
The Dominguez second that motion.
Thank you, Jovita. BRN comment, can you open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box. I would like to make a comment. Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you, nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Amy Ziegler would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, BRN moderator. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you a little bit louder, but you're fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, committee, for hearing my comment. I would just like to mention that as part of the APRN advisory committee, that all 4 APRNs, the nurse practitioners, CNS, CRNA, and midwives sit on that committee. By sunsetting this committee and establishing 4, you actually reduce the collaboration that our APRNs are very used to. And so I would like the BRN committee to take that under advisement, that by having all 4 separated, you actually separate the APRNs versus having them all together and collaborating under the APRNs. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Sharon Bogan would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I very much second what Amy said. We have for years and years and years been advocating collaboration among our whole profession, as well as collaboration with other disciplines. And so I think it would be a poor example of that to put for APRN professions in silos. And you could say, well, they can, they can set meetings to all meet together, but that's just not the same. I don't know what professions are represented on the APRN committee, but I would be very concerned for all of us, all professions, if they were all put in silos. And I also need to point out that the NPAC was created for a specific purpose, even though after AB 890 specifics are all worked out, they would remain the advisory committee, but they were created for a specific purpose, and which wasn't supported by all nurse practitioners in our state, that amendment to 890. So I would really be concerned about the adequate and proper representation of all four professions when these new committees would be created. And I really want to keep the unity of all APRNs. So I really implore that the board consider that unity that would be broken should we sunset this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Cynthia Yovanov would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Morning.
Go
Can you
ahead,
hear me?
Cynthia.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my comment. I just want to add that sunsetting the APRN board would actually be a disservice to all nurse practitioners and the 9 population foci that exist with certification. I think you are forgetting that we are missing out on psychiatric nurse practitioners. We are also missing out on women's health, even though they may be an arm to midwifery. And I think that having an APRN board actually has brought forth federal regulation to be implemented into state regulations such as the CARES Act. And having separate entities that cannot see federal regulation and implement them in a timely manner or address them would hurt our profession. It was already noted in the NPAC meeting that there is already dominance of specialty groups, and the fear is that this is going to continue without proper representation. So I would recommend that the APRN stays intact, does not get sunset, that it allows for the every 2 year to be reseated as specified in regulation, and that it gives opportunity for voices of the other 9 population foci that practices in rural, community, and acute care centers throughout California, as well as the Native American lands that we house their clinics. So dismantling this would be a truly disservice to the growth of our profession and the intent of serving our communities throughout California. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Patty Gurney would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
So much. Can you hear me? Hello,
Go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Patty, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Patty.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for taking my comment. I would like to echo my urging the board to not dismantle this committee. It is of utmost importance that the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Committee continue with their excellent expert input into all matters regarding APRN practice here in California. As you know, all of us have a very unique, here in California, we have a unique practice environment that has many, many different components The expertise and guidance of this committee has been of utmost importance to assist the Board of Registered Nursing to make sure that both our professions and the public are well protected and represented in the processes of caring for Californians. The description of how these new committees might be put together is utterly appalling to me. There's no process in place anywhere in legislation that would describe how these new committees would be set up. There's no kinds of safety that I'm hearing about that would make sure that a new committee would be representative and would have experts in those areas. Not only that, but it's very important that we have the ability to communicate on this, as it has been on this committee, between our professions, because we share many concerns, and that collaboration is of utmost importance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Reza. I wanted to make a couple real quick clarifications in response to some of what was said. The APRN Advisory Committee, it is not established in legislation. I don't believe it's even in regulation, and that's not improper or unusual. It was an ad hoc committee that was established. And so, there was a comment about the new proposed committees not being outlined in legislation. That's no different with the APRN Advisory Committee. So I wanted to make that clear. I think that was the one thing I wanted to say.
It looks like we missed maybe a couple of comments. I saw.
No, we just missed. Yeah, he jumped in after I said that. So sorry, I was going to wait.
He was already in at 10:02 too, I see.
Yeah, that was previous comment. He just jumped in right there. But I was waiting for Reza to finish, and then I was going to point that out.
Thanks.
Okay, 1 second, Mitch.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, Mr. Erickson has a comment. 1 second. Go ahead, sir.
Reza, I asked other committee members for the APRN Advisory Committee to step off the call just to avoid any adherence to the Open Meetings Act. So hopefully I can say what I have to say. Obviously, to the board, I cannot prevent the appearance of bias, given that I chair this committee, but I did canvass through the BRN the various members of this committee who uniformly supported continuation of this committee. And I will, although there is nothing in statute around this committee, there was previous language that came out of the Senate Committee on Business Professions and Economic Development and the Assembly Business and Professions Committee, which recommended the BRN should establish an advanced practice committee separate from the Nursing Practice Committee, whose goal is to survey existing laws and regulations and determine what is lacking for regulation of APRNs. The BRN should seek legislation, promulgate regulations, and develop advisories to ensure APRNs have sufficient guidance in all practice settings, end quote. I do agree with other comments previously that the creation of the NPAC and then the pre-existence of the NMAC do have a particular focus currently, and that will probably occupy a great deal of their time moving forward. And I think that the APRN Advisory Committee permits a very broad view of practice for the California public and serves as a resource to the BRN that only complements the other advisory committees. So I would respectfully ask that the BRN board reconsider this motion, and at least for the next year, as the other two committees work through the legislative issues before them. Thank you.
This is Ken Marlborough. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, establishing these two committees, which I'm not opposed to, but, this is the value of sometimes getting public comment. There are many other nurse disciplines out there. So how do we address that if it could be nurse managers, nurse administrators? How would we address that if they wanted to have their committee as well? In that, are we opening this up in that manner, or should we look at having a committee that would be inclusive to people who are not midwifery or nurse practitioners that could be a part of that particular committee so that everybody is included?
So I can speak to that, Ken. Thank you for the opportunity to do that as well. The BRN has jurisdiction over nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, clinical nurse specialists, and CRNAs. We do not have jurisdiction over the other specialty areas. We provide additional certifications to these specific specialties for APRN only. Therefore, those other groups are out of our jurisdiction. We are not a lobbying board. We do not have lobbying committees. These are specific to talk about our Nurse Practice Act, our regulations, and what we have jurisdiction over. So the APRN groups that we have jurisdiction over are these four. These four are why we would have advisory committees for these four. We are not excluding anybody. We do not have the jurisdiction over that. Additionally, to speak to silos, this is to actually get them out of silos. Right now, the APRN committee meets by themselves twice a year. And we have recently granted them a third meeting a year. With the establishment of the NMAC and the NPAC committees, we have them meeting 4 times a year. That doubles the time that they are here. Additionally, we have them reporting out to the practice committee, which meets 4 times a year. The practice committee is the committee that has the board presence on it. It has board members. It is only staffed by board members and nobody else. That practice committee is where all 4 of these advisory committees would report to. That practice committee would be the practice committee and would serve in being the group that has the collaboration. That practice committee would then have APRN issues, all 4 APRN issues brought to them, NMAC, NPAC, CNS, and CRNA. We are not taking away anything. We are streamlining. We are providing more opportunities and more opportunities for public input. We are we have listened to public comment. We have listened to public outcry and outreach. And yes, in some of the legislative conversations and recommendations in the past was to establish an APRN committee. That was because there was not one. And now it didn't say specifically that it had to be one committee. So we are now establishing 4 committees. I have been contacted by CRNAs who are working for a practice change right now. They do not have a committee and they want a practice change. I have been contacted by CNSs who want a practice change. The CNS role in California is not the same as it is throughout the nation. They want their voices heard. They want their committees. And they want a voice through that committee to look at what we can do to support that. So I do want to be very clear that we have moved from 2 meetings a year with the APRN. This would allow for 4 meetings a year for 4 groups who would then go forward to the practice committee for 4 meetings a year, where they would then meet as a collaborative group, very similar to the APRN, but with board input and board oversight, which would then help manage the 4 specialty areas that we have jurisdiction over.
I think overall, Ken, this is Dolores. Overall, I think it allows for not only more meeting time for each of these committees, but more focused work to be accomplished. for their practice.
I have a comment. I'm just wondering if we need to take this action now. Because, Lori, I appreciate the fact that you said that you've heard for CRNAs and CNSs that they don't feel like their voice is heard. But it's surprising to me that we didn't hear from any of them in the public comment. And I figure if that was really a pressing issue, that they would have been speaking up and explaining to us what was missing and what they really needed to do. I also thought it was telling that no one from the new NPAC is requesting to dissolve the APRN committee. So I would think that perhaps if they were concerned that there may be some conflict or confusion, that they would speak up and make a case for this. So what I would like to see us do is maybe just take a break from this, see what happens. I don't know why we need to make this move now. If we start to see conflict or hear from the CNSs and the CRNAs in person, for me as a board member, I would love to hear what it is that they feel like they're missing. Then we can take action at a later time.
Mary,
yeah.
Reza, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dolores.
I was just,
Okay.
I think you had mentioned to one of the members about speaking up and possibly violating either Bagley-Keene or a conflict of interest, but go ahead. There was an earlier member that had spoken up.
I'm not sure if I recall. It may have been a member of our NPAC committee who wanted to speak. But
Dr. Ray was a member of the NPAC committee.
Correct.
He was speaking, and Dr. Andrea Espinosa was in the attendees list, and she is a member of the NPAC committee, and Reza gave them specific instruction to not speak as to not violate Bagley-Keene.
Exactly.
What I was going to say, it was just that looking at our agenda, it does focus on the language of this agenda item is on the future of the APRN Advisory Committee. It doesn't really speak to establishing CNS and CNA committees. I think that's a pertinent part of this discussion, being that that's kind of the alternative or an alternative to having the APRN Advisory Committee. But that might be, for one thing, that might raise an issue about establishing those committees today. Also, it might answer part of Mary's question about why are we not hearing a lot from those professions, advocating in public comment. Of course, I think it was to be expected that there would be quite a bit of public comment about the APRN Advisory Committee and perhaps less about the others. It's not clear whether that would be like a notice issue, that maybe the other groups don't have notice that this is taking place. So I think to Mary's point, it may be worthwhile to kind of, as I said, I think it's fair game to discuss having those two new committees as part of this discussion. I think that's something that could be introduced here and maybe taken up at the next meeting, given kind of the somewhat limited language on the agenda. I do think, I think that there is some, as Mary was saying, there's a possibility of postponing any action on the APRN Advisory Committee as well. With that said, there's also, I think it's possible that you could make up your mind now and decide what's going to be the future of that committee. It's been in limbo for, a good 6 months at least now, and been operating that way for a while because we knew that there were these other committees and, one brand new one and one with the NMAC being kind of ramped up, called into question what this would be, and kicking the can down the road would only kind of prolong that status of limbo. With that said, also, from what I've just observed, there's been a lot of focus in the APRN Advisory Committee specifically on AB 890. That's kind of been what they have, what that committee has focused on largely. The Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee is kind of the obvious committee to be leading that. And it's arguably duplicative to have another committee doing the same thing, and arguably kind of not only duplicative and wasteful, but also it's, you know, there's the potential for conflicts if one committee comes up with a different outcome than the other committee. And, you know, almost that too many cooks in the kitchen kind of a situation. And not that, I mean, it's, you know, the more input and feedback and all that, the better. But there are mechanisms in this process for feedback and input to be given, and having, you know, multiple committees look at an issue, it to me, it's been, it's presented some challenges. And there's been a lot of advocacy in that committee in the APRN committee for certain positions to really advance AB 890. And I've had to kind of pump the brakes a little bit on that. And you know, I appreciate the enthusiasm to get AB 890 moving and get it implemented as quickly as possible. And we're right there with those folks that want that. But there's been kind of this overzealousness in that committee and when I say in that committee, you know, some of it is coming from public comments and things as well, but to really push AB 890. So the gist of what I'm trying to say is that this APRN advisory committee has largely been focused on AB 890, and now we have another committee who's kind of directly tasked with that. So it kind of begs the question of,
do we need to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is
Any
Betty.
other? Oh, go ahead, Betty.
I'm just not comfortable with pushing this through right now. I don't think I have enough information, and I don't know that we'll get the we're not going to get the information today. I would like to leave things in place as they are and then reevaluate it at some other time. I'm not comfortable with eliminating a committee and then pushing 2 new committees in at the present moment.
Thank you, Betty. Lori, when does the APRN committee meet again?
I believe they meet again in July.
Okay. Is that like the first, second meeting of the
It is
year?
their second meeting this year.
Okay.
They do have a upcoming agenda item on this meeting specifically related to 890 and transition to practice, which is what the NMAC committee is tasked with in statute. Sorry, NPAC. Thank you, Reza. And then the nurse practitioner has a meeting that will be scheduled in July as well. It is not currently scheduled, but that was discussed yesterday in the committee meeting. And then they will have another meeting in, I believe, August. So the NPAC committee is moving right along with 890 without delays.
Okay. And when is our next actual board meeting? Not committee meeting, but actual.
Today? No, I'm joking. The next scheduled board meeting is August.
Okay. I do feel that this is duplicate work. The focus on 890 is being taken up by the NPAC committee. In addition, having the CNS and the CRNA committees will hopefully provide more focused work in those 2 areas. So actually it would be 4 committees rather than the 1. My motion is still on the floor. Are there any other comments or questions?
Board President Trujillo, there are 2 more public
Okay.
comment?
We can take them.
Before the public comments, this is Reza. Just one suggestion on the motion. As I said, the language of the agenda is kind of raises an issue it's just kind of raises a question. The AIS, the agenda item summary for this item, does talk about, if I recall correctly, about the concept of having 2 new advisory committees for CNS and C and A's. Let me confirm that. I believe the AIS said it, but the agenda itself doesn't. It's in the AIS, but the agenda itself speaks only to this APRN advisory committee and not the formation of other new committees. So, in kind of an abundance of caution, what I would suggest the motion be is to sunset the APRN advisory committee and to place maybe on a future agenda discussion about and possible action about establishing the other 2 committees. Meanwhile, board staff can start to kind of work on what applications might look like and things like that for those committees in case we go that route. But the concern is just, again, the language of the agenda and whether it adequately notices formation of these other committees. So that would be my suggestion. Again, I think it's, the fact that it's discussed in the AIS, it's there, but it's not quite as, the notice about the 2 new committees is not quite as prominent. So, Dolores, I kind of leave it to you on what you want to do with the motion, but my advice would be just revise your motion to
So separate them.
separate them. Yeah. You would take up the new committees at a future meeting, and obviously, I think your motion to sunset the APR and advisory committee would be kind of with the anticipation of possibly taking action to set up 2 other committees in the very near future. So, that's, I think, pretty obviously understood.
Thank you, Reza. I'm just looking at the agenda item. It says if the board elects to disband the APRNAC, it could consider the formation of CRNA and CNS advisory committees. So your recommendation or thoughts would be possibly to sunset the APRN if we wanted to vote in that direction, and then hold off on the creation of the CNS and the CRNA committees. Reza?
Sorry, I'm speaking on mute. That's exactly it. And it's you can call it an oversight as far as, what you were reading was from the meeting materials and not the agenda itself. I just want to ensure that there was, notice to anyone that might not have looked at the materials, but looked at the agenda and not, seen an item that specifically relates to CRNAs.
So we have board moderator. We have a couple of people on public comment.
Okay. All right. Are we ready?
Yes, we're ready. We can go
Okay.
ahead to public comment.
Shake would like to make a public comment. 1 second, please. Shake, go ahead. Shake, go ahead. Shake. Sorry, we'll come back to Shake.
Okay.
Hold on here. Sharon Vogan would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, thank you. I had a clarification question to ask earlier on the other two committees. But it seems to have been answered that there actually was no plan in place. And you know, nurses are not known for moving forward without a plan. I think we're actually known for the exact opposite, having a plan before we move forward. So I really implore everybody to not take action. I don't know where this urgency seems to be coming from, but I don't see an urgency for this. I also, in regards to there being duplicate work, the NPAC is working out the AB 890, and according to the bill, it's the NPAC that needs to do that. So I don't know what the APRN committee is focusing on right now, but they don't need to focus on AB 890 since the NPAC is doing that. And so the APRN committee is really necessary because there are so many other practice issues to discuss and so many other collaborative potential to discuss with other professions. So I don't think there is any duplicate work going on right now. And I think there's a lot of other important issues that the APRN committee can address. And I also am wondering if there is, you know, where the CNSs and the CRNAs are who are really wanting these committees. I'm just wondering where they are also. So again, I don't think there's a rush, and I don't think that we should rush to a decision when there's so much uncertainty in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Cynthia Yovanov would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Me back on.
Go ahead,
Hi,
Cynthia.
Hi, thank you for letting me back on. You know, I wanted to remind everybody that the APRN committee was put in place to advocate for all of us when the BRN had their own issues to deal with. And the NPAC was not in place until the bill was passed. Then we ran into problems choosing the committee based on, as we discussed earlier, you guys discussed implicit bias based on the selection, and there were issues there. You guys chose a physician that was not NP friendly, and then you had to replace it, so there was an issue there. The APRN continued to move the agenda and continues to move the agenda, not just with AB 890, but also federal regulation, which means billing, practice, insurances, CARES Act, hospice care, home health. The NPAC is not going to be able to address all those issues. As the previous meeting yesterday, it's going to take a good year for the OPPS to establish a crosswalk for our regulatory bodies to identify proper certification, etc. So that alone pushes back a year of discussing what it's going to look like for transition to practice. On top of that, the APRN has such a broad scope to address our practices in all specialties. The other thing I want to address is that I agree with Mary Fagan of tabling this discussion because it's not going to bring out a positive outcome with things still in limbo, in transition. And as of yesterday's meeting, you had people who still didn't understand the bill of AB 890. So that's an issue here. And I bring this forward to the public because it is a concern. This is just another form of obstruction for us to move forward, not just with our bill, but other potential bills, other federal legislation, so that it is properly in place for us to practice to the scope of our practice. And I just want to address that because I don't know what the personal agenda is to dismantle this or sunset. It's not going to benefit any of the APRNs. So thank you for allowing me to make this comment.
Thank you, Cynthia. Patty Gurney would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
And I want to, hello?
Go ahead, Patty. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for letting me make a comment. I would just also implore the board not to dismantle this committee until there is a clear public plan in place that that the public can make a comment on, and particularly those of us who are advanced practice registered nurses, to with regards to these two new proposed committees. I haven't heard anything from the CRNAs or the CNSs with regards to these new committees. The APRN committee has served advanced practice registered nurses in California incredibly well. They have given us a wealth of expertise. They are experts with regards to nurse practice as well as APRN, and we need them to continue that work while we are in such an important phase of care and caring for patients in California with regards especially to this COVID epidemic. Please do not dismantle them until there's a clear plan in place that we can comment on and agree that is beneficial. Without such a plan in place, it is really truly dangerous to consider dismantling this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Melanie
real
Rowe.
quick. Mark, this is Lori's the EO. I do have just some clarification I would like to present for consideration. In our sunset report that we prepared in December, we mentioned that we would be discussing the continuation of the APRN committee and looking to possibly establish committees that would represent CNS and CRNAs. Additionally, in our sunset response paper, the legislative staff specifically called it out as issue number 15. And we did respond in that as well. We do have plans in place. We can move quickly on establishing if that is something that our board chooses to go forward with. As you noted, November was October 31st, essentially, was when that bill, the two bills were signed, and we had committees established by February. So in that process of establishing those two new committees, we were also looking at the APRN committee, and that has been communicated to our legislative staff during our sunset report, and then in direct relation to the question from the legislative staff on question number 15 in our response paper. Those are both items that have been put forth to the board and voted on to accept and were submitted by the board. Additionally, I do want to point out the current membership of the APRN committee. There are 4 nurse practitioners, 2 nurse midwives, 2 CNSs, 2 CRNAs. And when that committee was established, there was public outcry over inadequate and unequal representation of the groups by having 4 NPs, 2 CRNAs, 2 CNSs, and 2 CNMs. So again, we're further answering the public comment and the cry. I just hope that you guys consider that we do have a plan. This has been in place for months. And we have been having discussions around this for months, and including discussions to our legislative personnel. Thank you very much.
Melanie Rowe would like to make a comment. Go ahead,
Hello.
Melanie.
Thank you. This is Melanie Rowe. I am the practice director for the California Association of Nurse Anesthetists, and I am a CRNA. We really appreciate and support the work that the APRN Advisory Committee has done thus far, and we support the continuation if that is the vote for today of the board. We also strongly support the BRN in their efforts to create a separate CRNA board. We definitely would want the BRN to control who the members are and who comprises the membership of that board so that it supports CRNA practice. And we have faith that the BRN would do so in a way that is supportive of CRNA practice and for public safety. And so we appreciate the work that the BRN staff has done on this so far. So just to reiterate, We appreciate and have been so supportive of the work that the current APRN advisory committee has done thus far, and we can support that continued work if that's so the case. But if a separate CRNA board is created, we strongly desire the BRN to make the rules and comprise that board so that it protects CRNA practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. GGK would like to make a comment. Second, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Can you hear me?
GGK. Yes.
Okay, as a public member, I want to bring to the attention of the board members that, for example, yesterday in NPAC committee, the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, couldn't even find time to get through their own agenda. They have to actually table one of the agendas for future meeting. And they had to understand the actual implications of transfer of practice. So I feel you need to give them more time to actually understand what's happening with AB 890 rather than putting more information on them. So as Mary Fagan said, I would recommend the nurse APRN advisory committee to be at least exist for another 1 year, and then once then NPAC gets their act together, then you guys can revisit and think about either resenting or sunsetting this. So as of now, I think it's necessary for them to keep continuing till NPAC gets an act, get their idea of what they are to get their work get done to finish the work for AB 890. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to Shakay. Hold on here. Let me see if she's ready. Shakay, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to basically kind of an alignment with everybody else, just say my concern about dismantling the APRN, which is basically a whole entity governing all the other specialties. It would be better to have the collaboration in place. I mean, all my concerns have been already said and discussed, but I just wanted to comment that in my opinion, it would be better to have a whole entity governing until this AB 890 is resolved, and then maybe talk about having separate committees for separate specialties afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakay. Board President Trujillo, we had a request for a comment, but the person had already commented on this, so I believe that we decided that 2 minutes it was enough and they weren't allowed to comment again. So okay. There are no other public requests for comments, so would you like me to close this window?
Sure.
Thank you.
So in go ahead,
Reza. I was just going to mention a couple quick points in response to some of those recent comments, if I may. So couple of things. So for one thing, one of the comments was about the APRN Advisory Committee. The Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee is now focusing on AB 890, so the APRN Advisory Committee can do other work. I would invite anyone interested to look at the past meetings of the APRN Advisory Committee. It's largely been dominated by nurse practitioner related issues, specifically AB 890. That's been the big push in the APRN Advisory Committee. Seems like every meeting there's a number of agenda items that pertain to that. So theoretically, the APRN Advisory Committee could do other work, but that's not what's happening. The focus is, and has for quite a while, been AB 890. And the question came up: what's the urgency? Why is there such an impetus behind sorting this out now? As I said, for the past at least 6 months, there's been this just uncertainty about what's going on. What's the future of the APRN Advisory Committee? And part of why that uncertainty has been problematic is because of what I just said. The APRN Advisory Committee has largely focused on AB 890. So with that being the case, over the last 6 months, there's been a lot of just kind of uncertainty about what's the point of that committee focusing on AB 890 if there's another committee that has to do work related to AB 890? And there were some other comments just now about, the nursing practice committee has taken so long to get off the ground. And, we talked about that numerous times before about how it was done probably as quickly as it legitimately could have, but that's a separate issue. I think some of the comments were kind of suggesting that maybe the APRN advisory committee continue to work on AB 890 while the nurse practitioner advisory committee kind of get more, established and up and running. On that, this is something I've said before, but I'll go back to it. Business Professions Code 2837.102 says that the board shall establish a nurse practitioner advisory committee to advise and make recommendations to the board on all matters relating to nurse practitioners, ... So I've asked the question before, and it's rhetorically, because there is no, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Based on that language from that section that I just read, I think it's hard to argue that the NPAC necessarily needs to be involved in advising the board on AB 890. So that kind of goes against the suggestions that APR and advisory committee should keep doing that work while the NPAC is still kind of getting, on its feet. So at best, I think it is duplicative because you'll have two committees doing kind of operating on parallel tracks, working on AB 890. Another issue that has come up, not just today, but in numerous meetings of the advisory committee as well as the board, where public comments kind of suggested a misunderstanding or misconception of the role of our advisory committees. I've said this before, but I'll reiterate, the board's mission is public protection, and the board's advisory committees serve to advise the board in its advancement of that mission, public protection. What's happened, unfortunately, is we've I'm sure it happens innocently, but we end up, particularly in this APR and advisory committee, with a lot of advocacy on behalf of the professionals, advocating on behalf of what's good for nurse practitioners and the various APRN groups. And again, I understand that, I'm sure that's well-intentioned, but it's just kind of a misunderstanding of what the role of that group is. Somebody just now said that, talked about APRN advisory committee was put in place to advocate for all of us. And I assume that means all APRN groups. Well, that it might be kind of a technicality, but no, that's not. None of the BRNs, the BRN itself, nor any of its advisory groups are intended to advocate on behalf of professions. That's the role of professional associations. We're a consumer protection group. So that's something I've observed in that meeting, that little hints of advocacy on behalf of the profession come out more than I'd like to see. And there was talk about the board chose a physician that was not friendly to NPs. Well, again, this advisory committee was not put in place to advocate on behalf of NPs. It was put in place to implement AB 890 among all its other roles in the best interests of consumers. The comments about the APR and advisory committee being essential to advocate on behalf of the advanced practice professions, I'd like you all to, you board members, to kind of take that with a grain of salt, that those comments, again, certainly well-intentioned and well-meant, but those comments are kind of, I see an issue with that. Let me just make sure I addressed everything I wanted to. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So Thank you.
Thank you, Reza.
Yeah, I totally appreciate what you said, but I personally still do not see what the negative impact would be of waiting until our August meeting when we've had a little more chance for this to play out, to see, you know, what the issues really are that we are proposing to address by dissolving the APRN Advisory Committee.
I too appreciate everybody's comment, but I do want to call for the question.
Okay.
So I believe
So-
Dolores's motion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is to sunset the APRN Advisory Committee effective immediately. And that's the end of the motion. But that would be with the anticipation that at the next meeting, we may discuss and possibly take action on 2 new committees for CNS and CNS.
Sure. So, Mary, this has been in the works and has been discussed. It's also in our sunset paper, as Lori reiterated. So this is not something that has been rushed or not thought about or thought. We've been considering this as a board off and on since last November. So I would like to revise the original motion that I put on the table. And I would like to make a motion to sunset the APRN immediately. And we can leave out the 2 committees on the previous motion, the CNS and the CRNA. Leave those out for further discussion in a board meeting. But right now, 890, out of that bill came the NPAC committee. And the NPAC committee just started to do work regarding 890. From what I have observed, the APRN has been doing, having a lot of discussion at their meetings regarding 890. But we have a committee that is working on that. And so it seems that having 2 committees working on it seems like duplicate work to me. So I just want to put that out there. And my motion, again, to reiterate, is to sunset the APRN committee immediately. We'll leave out the portion of establishing the CNS and CRNA committees until a future board meeting, and we can have discussion on that portion of establishing those committees. Do I have a
Okay,
second?
called for the question. Thank you.
Do I have a second?
Jovita Dominguez seconds that motion.
Thank you, Jovita. Can I have, is there any other board discussion before we take the vote on that particular motion? Okay. I'm going to call for the vote. Reza, we've had public comment on this extensively.
Yes, I think we've had adequate public comment.
Again, yeah. Okay, so Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Ken?
Ken Marlborough votes no.
Okay. Susan?
Susan Naranjo votes yes.
Jovita?
Jovita Dominguez votes yes.
Mary?
Mary Fagan, no.
Betty?
Woods votes no.
Imelda?
Imelda votes no.
So I believe the motion failed. Reza? Okay.
That's right.
All right, moving on.
We need a new motion, Dolores.
Sorry. Excuse me?
We need a new motion, Dolores.
Okay.
Either we need a new motion or there's just not going to be any action taken on this agenda item. What I was going to say was just that if there is no action taken on this agenda item, then APRN Advisory Committee will have its next meeting as scheduled. And I presume that this may be placed on the next board meeting agenda for further discussion. If we don't come up with another motion here. I'm not sure what another motion would be. And as I said, I don't know if the board members want to give any direction to the APRN Advisory Committee if there's no other action today about the scope of what they do in their upcoming meetings, or allow them to kind of set their own agenda, which, as I said, has largely been AB 890 focused as of late. So again, it's up to you all whether you want to come up with a new motion or just kind of leave it where it is for now and just go on.
I'm comfortable leaving it where it is.
Anyone else?
I'm also comfortable with leaving it.
This is Betty. I'd like to leave it the way it is and let that committee decide what they're going to do.
I think we should have further discussion at the next board meeting. I would like to see the minutes from the July APRN meeting when that takes place and have that presented to the board. Is that a possibility, Reza?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Lori, unless you see any logistical issues as far as timing in preparing the minutes or anything else.
That might be short timing since the board meeting is in August and the committee meeting is in, I believe, July. But I can work with staff to get at least a draft. It would not be final because it would not have a chance to be voted on by the committee. So what you would receive is a draft because we do not have a committee meeting after the July meeting to pass the meeting minutes before going to the board meeting in August.
Even a draft would probably be helpful for the board members to see and make a somewhat informed decision at our next board meeting. So I would like to put that on the agenda.
I can get that done for you.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm not going to make any further motion, Reza. If there's no further discussion on this, we can move to the next topic on the agenda.
Dolores, could we take just a really quick break?
Sure. 15?
That would be great.
Okay, so it's basically 11:30 right now, so 11:45 we'll come back.
Perfect. Thanks.
All right.